For many years, we've had a misconception about the pyramids. Most people think these stones were manually carved and stacked, but research experts have discovered that these massive stones, weighing hundreds of tons, were likely cut using a giant metal saw. Analysis shows that ancient Egyptians had the strength and wisdom to transport the stones, but the challenge was how they cut them so precisely that not even a piece of paper could fit between them. The answer is that if you visit Egypt and closely examine some of the stones, you'll notice some unique markings. It's clear that this wasn't done with simple tools. The precision of these cuts suggests that the ancient Egyptians must have had some unknown cutting device. However, in archaeological excavations in Egypt, we haven't found any such cutting equipment. What's certain is that when faced with such a magnificent pyramid, the idea of shaping these stones by hand is simply unrealistic. Later, some scholars showed us nearby stones with various types of cuts, including straight cuts, diagonal cuts, and deep saw marks. Flinders Petrie, a renowned British archaeologist, first discovered this phenomenon in 1883. He believed that the stones of the Egyptian pyramids were cut using a type of bar saw, and he documented this significant discovery in his book about the pyramids and temples of Giza. In his work, he analyzed several types of cuts found on the local stones. Flinders believed that the Egyptians must have had more than one type of cutting tool, possibly including straight saws, circular saws, copper saws, and copper-edged saws. He was certain these stones couldn't have been shaped by hand. Later, experts suggested that the cutting device might have been circular, as some stones showed faint curved marks on their surfaces. However, Flinders calculated that if it was a large circular saw, it would have to be over 9 to 10 meters in diameter. Just imagine, what kind of equipment could support such a massive cutting disc? Has anyone here ever seen anything like that? So he firmly believes that this tool is not circular. We then discovered through a cutting gap in the stone that the thickness of the cutting blade should be around 8 millimeters. So now the question is, what does this device actually look like? If we first rule out extraterrestrial technology and look at it from a human perspective, the former archaeologist Moores once modeled this device as circular, and his insights are described in detail in one of his articles. First, it's like this. There's a G-shaped hanging saw beneath two X-shaped support frames with people on either side responsible for pulling. The stone is placed below, and the person above is responsible for maintaining the saw's vertical angle to prevent misalignment. Once the preparations are complete, the people on both sides pull and push, allowing them to cut the stone. Around the year 2000, another archaeologist, Dennis Stockey, and his team built a small copper saw to try to cut through a piece of granite in order to test the aforementioned theory. According to the data, this saw was 1.8 meters long, 15 centimeters wide, 6 millimeters thick, and weighed about 14 kilograms. During the sawing process, Dennis kept adding sand to the saw to increase the cutting force. Although this seemed to have minimal effect, they did manage to create a depth of several millimeters in the granite after half a day's work. I have to say, this really proves the saying, with enough perseverance, even iron can be ground into a needle. However, Dr. Dennis overlooked one issue. They should have made a larger saw. But when we examine these flat cutting surfaces more closely, we find that the stone's flatness and the uneven scratches at the edges couldn't possibly have been achieved by a simple back and forth motion. This cutting tool must have operated at an extremely high speed to achieve such results.